I'm sorry, did you say something?
No.
No, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry. You want to start? Yeah.
No,
No,
you could,
it's just
by all
no.
means, it's your episode.
Well, no, it's true. It's it's I don't know, but I feel like Welcome to the 10th episode of If You're Not First, You're Last, and that little repartee was based on our subject this week, which is Bob Newhart. Now, we're not technically doing the Bob Newhart TV shows. We are doing Bob Newhart albums as his first and last, seeing that we wanted to do a music episode, but at the same time, we wanted to be a little bit different, and we decided to go with someone you may not think has 2 Grammys, but he does. But first, let's start off with Bob Newhart, still alive. One of the few subjects of this show that is still alive. We usually go for the dead ones because then we know it's his last. But he decided to do his 5th TV show tomorrow, and then we look stupid. But no, he definitely will have to be doing a comedy album anytime soon because he's not done one since 1967. But Bob Newhart is our subject. Actually, his name is George Robert Newhart. But decided to go with Bob Newhart, and he is the king of the pause. So that is why we're talking about him today and how he took what made him a great comedian and a very different comedian for the time, then made him into an absolute TV star, never a movie star for sake of argument. There's no, like Jim Carrey-esque Will Ferrell movie performance we can all like go, oh, he's here. Never did that. No, but he did do 2 of the greatest sitcoms of all time, The Bob Newhart Show and Newhart. Now, it's important that we stress for this episode, so we're going to be saying Bob a lot. Do not play Hey Bob while watching this episode because you will die. So to start off with Hey Bob, of course, is a famous drinking game from the 70s where people would watch Bob Newhart on Saturday nights on CBS, and then they would drink every time someone said Hey Bob. Virginia, do you have a favorite drinking game?
I don't think I do.
Maybe both our was in your 20s, was there ever one that you love to play drinking game?
Was there? No, because a lot of the drinking games seem to be collecting blackmail material.
Oh, okay.
They're, like the Never Have I Ever and stuff, and I'm like,
yes.
You could just lie. So I try not to do. Oh, we used to do Flip Cup.
Flip Cup's fun. I never in my life did I play beer pong. Never did I play beer pong. The closest I ever came to drinking games would be ones where we'd be the question game where you would have to ask questions back and forth without ever answering them, and it would be very hard not to answer the questions. I was very good at that game. But yes, one of the key things to this episode, of course, is his shows, where the key to his shows was that he is the greatest. He's so calm and he's so able to enjoy a pause that he picked 2 TV shows that allowed him to do that in the perfect way. What is your first Bob Newhart experience that you remember?
I know that there used to be reruns of his show at Nick at Night.
Right.
And I was too young to appreciate them. I think it was just seeing as a guest star on shows. I feel like he was on Saturday Night Live.
He hosted
Did they do a Hey Bob game?
They did it this really weird yes. This is during maybe the worst season in history of SNL, 1995, the last Will Ferrell Adam Sandler season before Will Ferrell came in.
Because then they were like, "Hey Bob," and then
they did like it was Farley and
David Spade was in it.
Yeah, it was Farley and Chris Elliott were just drinking shots every time someone said "Hey Bob," and like Ellen Cleghorn and David Spade, like, you're gonna die if you keep this up, and people would just come up and say "Hey Bob" to him the whole time. There was also a sketch where Jay Moore played Ricky Lake and Bob Newhart played a psychiatrist on the show. He's playing Bob Newhart.
I remember that. I must have blocked that from.
I just remember him going,
that sounds horrendous.
It was horrible. I just remember Jay Moore's like ridiculous Ricky Lake impression. I just remember like that. But yes, he was an SNL. Again, he is a comedy legend. And what's interesting about him as a comedy legend is in the 1950s and 60s, everyone was wacky and loud as possible. The Shecky Greens, the Rickles, who was his best friend in life, all these comics that were so loud and boisterous because they were playing before rock bands and jazz bands and stuff, and they had to be kind of these loud. You had this guy who would just take 10, 15 seconds on stage and just look at you and just wait. And the audience, you hear in that first album, you hear them anticipating, and then he doesn't allow it. He just like, no. Again, some of those, like, I did stand up, and I can't imagine doing 7, 8, 9 minute long bits, because if it's failing in minute 2, what are you gonna do for the next 7 minutes? Like, he was so confident in what he did that he would do these such long bits that had these jokes along the way that were different, but they're so long. Like, and again, he's the king of not only pauses, but they're like, you're hearing half of a conversation, which I don't understand how you do that.
Say he's the reactor.
Yeah, but
you never hear the crazy story
right
that he's reacting to. You just have to piece it together from his end of whether it was the captain coming back or someone on the phone.
But yeah, it's just he's able in a smart way, not in a way where it over elaborates. It's not like, so you say, you know, da 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 da. It's just these little things you could pick up from his side of conversation that works so well. And he's so soft and he's so subtle. I told Virginia before the episode that, you know, I'm listening to in the car. You could listen to the entire album in a 30-minute drive. It's a 34-minute album.
I was listening to his last album. And then I was like, did I put this on shuffle? Because suddenly Norm Macdonald started talking. I'm like, was Norm Macdonald on a Bob Newhart album? I'm like, oh, it's 6 songs or 6 bits.
Six,
I mean, it's
4 to 7 minutes. And literally in the one, and I will say it now because it's not that big of a spoiler, but there is one piece in the first album that's called The Driving Instructor, where he yells. And I was driving, and it's so calm, like you could almost fall asleep. He's so subtle, he's so quiet, and then he just goes, "Look out!" like that. I just went, I flipped out. I was
just that sheer one screech of panic.
Yeah.
And I had
like
texted Jeff. I'm like, this is the only man that can do a women driver's joke that doesn't annoy me.
Oh, it's great. It's so fun. But again, it's the pauses, and it's this kind of thing that just, you know, allowed him to be subtle in an era where, again, it was Don Rickles, who's like, you know, squirting flower ties and, you know, flowers in your chest and pulling ties and stuff, like the Rat Pack. Like, he was at the same, this is the era of the Rat Pack, which is the loudest, most boisterous comedy of all, you know, Jerry Lewis, for God's sake. And then you have this man in 1958 just doing the most subtle and soft and quiet comedy. Like, it's so unbelievable, and it's his own thing, and you know, there's such an imprint on him on certain comics, even though I do think no one is as subtle as he is, and no one does bits as long as him. I do think, like, Greg Giraldo is a comic I love. There's certain comics that I think that I hear where I go, the softer parts of their act are Bob Newhart.
Yeah.
So like we said,
because I'm watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but I'm only on season 2.
Okay.
But wasn't it in the very beginning? The very first episode. Was the Bob Newhart was the album.
Yeah, the husband
discovers that her husband's lifting the material. Sorry, I spoiled it, and I just said no spoilers. So I won't spoil anything else.
What's amazing about that is
Lenny Bruce after that, or Red Fox, or
I just want now all I want to do is watch Miss Maisel with you, because it's one of my favorite shows, and the Lenny Bruce stuff is amazing. And there's a scene from season 4 that makes me cry every time. But
I have to catch up on it.
It's okay. I'll wait for you. But what's amazing about that Maisel moment is I saw that, and because I am a comedy nerd, I go, that's not right. And I looked it up. That show took place in 1958. The first Bob Newhart album, which he rips off, comes out in 1960. So he's 2 years ahead.
Oh.
So it's actually not possible that he did that. You can say, well, maybe you listen to his, but no, but he listens to it's from the album.
Yeah,
that first album. Yeah, that first album is such a big thing. Because first of all, Bob Newhart did come from the advertising industry, so of course, Mad Men talked about him. So that
explains the Ledge one. Okay.
Yes. So he came from one of the bigger agencies in New York, and he was doing stand up, and that is why episode 4, the first season of Mad Men, they're listening to this album, which is correct. It came out after that, so it's fine. So these two shows that all, if you're talking late 50s, early 60s, you're going to talk about Bob Newhart because he was gigantic. Now we're going to talk about a really amazing fact about this album a little bit later, but it was a zeitgeist moment, and it was an album that you could listen to at a party, like again early Lenny Bruce albums. Don Rickles were things where like you'd be at a party and they would just play a comedy album, which is something I would do when people would throw rocks at me in the 90s. Like, when you
watch Mr. Show at your house.
That's true.
That's like the equivalent at a party.
That's true. Yes.
We kind of ignored the party. There's like 5 of us in your room.
I'm just watching, yes, to show the milkman.
The roommate will take care of it.
Yes, exactly. But so he was this kind of zeitgeisty thing, and then he when we said we're gonna do his first and last album, I swore he did an album in the 90s, which was actually a live album of his first bits, so it's kind of a little bit of a cheat. His last album was 1967, so in a weird way, he's the first Eddie Murphy. Because he started as a stand-up comedian, and he was a giant zeitgeist kind of comedian. He became a television star in 1972. Before that, he was on Dean Martin's show, Don Rickles' show, Don Rickles' Celebrity Roast. But in 72, when he became a TV star, he never did stand-up again. Again, he made his living doing Vegas show. So in a weird way, he is the first Eddie Murphy. Because again, Eddie Murphy he's been saying for 7 years now he's going to go back and do stand-up. Steve Martin has said he's going to go back and do stand-up. These are 3 men that were so on top of the game, so huge. They went into something else and they never went back. And that's a weird thing because you look at Jerry Seinfeld, he still does it, although he hasn't made a CD in a long time. Like the CD has kind of gone away. You now have like the TikTok clips or certain clips that are famous.
Everyone has a Netflix special.
Netflix specials or, something like that, but they kind of all gone away from this idea of the album. Kind of the last one to have that really zeitgeisty, and I hate to say it because I don't like him, is the lover of the young ladies, Dane Cook. So,
I thought you were going to say Adam Sandler because I remember.
No, Adam Sandler's nice out.
But yeah, Dane Cook would be
the last one.
Sandler.
Yeah. So let's talk a little about the Bob Newhart show. So Bob Newhart show came in 1972, and ended in 1978, so 6 years, and it is the perfect premise for a Bob Newhart sitcom. He plays a psychiatrist, so it allows him to have these long pauses, these long kind of stuttery conversations where he's listening to somebody and he's reacting to the conversation. So for the first time, we're hearing the conversation. We're hearing the other side of the conversation because he has these characters.
He does group therapy.
Yes. And it's just an amazing show, and it is part of, in my mind, the greatest lineup in history of television. And I prepped a little bit for Virginia for this question, but I wanted to see if she can guess. Long before must-see TV on Thursday nights on NBC, there is the single greatest night of comedy in the history of the world. These are 5 shows, 4 sitcoms, 1 variety show that were on Saturday night. Now that to us is insane that you'd have your best shows on a Saturday night, but this was the 70s and gas was expensive. So 4 comedies, all on CBS.
See, this is I don't know the network.
And a hour-long comedy variety show.
Okay.
So one of them is.
Was that Sonny and Cher?
It is not Sonny and Cher. It's similar because it had the same costume designer. That may help you a lot. Same costume.
Was the 60s, right?
Late 60s, early 70s. Okay, and was on ABC.
Not laughing.
No. Same costume designer as Sonny and Cher. So Bob Mackey's involved in this show.
Oh, it's Carol Burnett.
Carol Burnett is the hour-long comedy at the end of the night. So you end the night with Carol Burnett. You started with Bob. You started with such a legendary show. Wasn't
it? That was live because I've been watching Carol Burnett on PBS, and there are bits where you see them break.
Yes.
Or an accident happens. That was a live one.
It was shot live.
Okay. Yeah.
So then the other four sitcoms.
Okay. Again, Was Norman Lear involved in these?
Norman Lear was involved in one of them.
Okay. Was it All in the Family?
It was all the night started with All in the Family, then went into Bob Newhart.
Okay, so I have 2 more to guess.
Yes.
Who Was one Mary Tyler Moore?
Yes, it was. You're doing great.
Was
That's
she?
not-
Wasn't she? Okay, wait. She was the one. She didn't guest on Bob Newhart at
No,
all?
she did not. No.
Oh, then it was another brunette with her hairstyle. I just
That
saw a
was
thumbnail.
yes. The female lead of the show, of course, was the great Suzanne Plachette, married to a
Yeah, but
voice actor
there
on
was
that
like
show.
some episode, and I was like, "Is that
Yes.
Mary Tyler Moore?" Okay, so I have one more.
One more. I don't consider this a comedy. I'll tell you that.
Oh, so it's not going to be Welcome Back, Kotter.
It's not.
Is it
No, that was
Taxi?
it's not. Taxi was 80s, and that was CBS. You're correct. It was ABC, then moved to NBC. This was CBS 70s.
But you don't find it a comedy?
I don't.
It's
I think
supposed to be a comedy.
but it's like super serious. See, I want to give you a Woody Allen hint, but I don't think you would get it. If it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not funny. I don't know if you know that line.
That's about spaghetti. No, wait. No, I don't know why I said that.
Great. Love it. So you don't smush potatoes? What do you do with potatoes?
Oh, mash. Mash
Yes.
is only half an hour?
Mash is only half an hour. Yes.
See, that's funny. I always feel like MASH was an hour and Carol Burnett was half an hour. I got the time wrong. Okay, MASH.
So yes, so
Okay.
On the Family, Bob Newhart, Mary Tyler Moore, MASH, and you ended the night off with Carol Burnett. It's the greatest night of television ever. There's nothing close to it.
It started as a comedy, MASH.
Yes, but then one of my mortal enemies got his hands on the show and decided that Bob Geldorf was wrong and it should not be funny, and that was Alan Alda.
Yeah, I think Seth MacFarlane feels the same way.
It's awful. Just do you know what happens? I'm gonna ruin MASH for everyone in this audience. I'm gonna ruin it.
I guess we're not covering this.
We're never covering MASH. No. In the second to last episode of the show, Alan Alda decides to do one of the craziest things. He has a mental breakdown. He's in a hospital. He's having flashbacks to this scene on a Hawkeye. Yes. Okay. He's in the back of a truck with a bunch of Korean, because the Korean War is hilarious. A bunch of Korean refugees, and this woman has a chicken in her arms that's just balking away, and it's gonna give everyone away. They're all going, "Shut up, quiet, stop it, quiet your chicken down," and then she breaks the chicken's neck. So it's for my sister and other people who love animals, this is horrible enough. But over the course of the episode, you realize, and again, this is why Alan Alda sucks, and he's not subtle at all. I
know this one.
Yes, he goes crazy, and he's like, "No, you don't understand. It was a baby. It was a baby," and he just starts crying, and it's just this shit. And I laughed my face off because it was just his performance is insane. And yes, that's an awful thing to happen, of course, but it's just. You just finished watching Mary Tyler Moore and you're about to watch Carol Burnett. Do you really want to see a woman crack her baby's neck? Like, stop it, Alan Alda. Stop it. But yeah. So the greatest night of television.
I don't know.
It was a baby. I sometimes say that to my students and they don't have no idea what I'm talking about. I just go, "It was a baby." But yes. So Bob Newhart.
Smith.
Yes, Bob Newhart had several famous co-stars. Mrs. Krabappel from The Simpsons was his secretary.
Yeah. That was my trying to sell it to the kids. I'm like, "You love The Simpsons. Hey, you recognize this voice?"
One of the dumb I'm breaking a lot of hearts this episode. I hate Alan Alda. I don't like Matt Groening. Matt Groening's what he thought was one of his great jokes that he thought made The Simpsons great was he always said Mrs. Krabappel instead of Miss Crabapple. Even that's how you spell it. Like that's the kind of genius he is. Tom Poston, who later would be on Newhart, was the voice of the doorman that you never saw.
Oh.
And Tom Poston is the real life husband of Suzanne Plachette, who played Bob Newhart's wife in the first show. Perfect casting. I love her in that show. Too many. It's corny to say because Mary Tyler Moore was already in the air, but too many wives were Edith. Too many wives were like the ditz, and the husband was the smart one. And Suzanne Plachette never played that again. This is the era that Maude came out. One of my B. Arthur. We're gonna do her at some point because
Oh yes,
she's amazing. Yeah, like just Maude, and then of course she started on All in the Family. She was Edith's cousin. So she just an amazing character. And Suzanne Plachette is really groundbreaking as being a wife who wasn't like, as great as Mary Tyler Moore is, her role on the Dick Van Dyke Show was just to wear like incredibly tight pants. Like that was her role in that show. There's like, and then sometimes she would come in to do the skit of the week. But Suzanne Plachette with her voice and everything, she was just like
Suzanne Plachette.
She's amazing.
She's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
First of all, she can. I would just sit there and I'm like, she's so pretty. I think I'm gonna kill myself.
I do wonder if
that
Suzanne
Plachette.
Does Stockard Channing owe her career? Like literally, does Stockard Channing owe her career to Suzanne Plachette?
It's similar coloring, but I feel like it's.
But also the voice
similar. I don't know.
Like it's lower register. Like, Suzanne Plachette on the West Wing on these shows. I think I'm sorry. Stockard Channing on shows was playing a Suzette Plachette type character. Like this very like, I'm fully aware you're full of shit, but I'm gonna see where you go with this. Because I want. How deep will you go down this well of wrong before you admit you're wrong? Is kind of what I feel.
Yeah. I just feel like it's being compared because they have similar coloring. Like they both have black hair, pale skin, light eye. Well, wait. I feel like Susan Plachette had darker eyes. I wouldn't get them confused.
No, I do think there's a type, and I think when they were making Grease, they said we need a Suzanne Plachette type, and they said
they might have.
We have Stockard Channing, and she was in a movie about a super train. So there you go. This is before, of course, her great run in the 80s and 6 Degrees of Separation, where she just killed it and should have won the Oscar. Let's say that right
Criterion.
Now. Yes, it's a great movie.
And I love her role in To Wong Fu.
You're just enough camp for me. Like literally our friendship, if you were just an eighth more campy, like just an eighth more campy, we'd have problems. But no, you're just the perfect amount of camp where I allow it. Like you're just enough. It's so bad it's good. Like you're just enough of it.
Enough energy to be more camp than this.
Yeah, no, this
is authentic camp.
I have always said Virginia comes out of a movie. It's like Purple Rose the Kairos, where the character comes out of the movie and like is in. I always the way you talk and everything about you is like she's from like some really cool 1980s like Jim Jarmusch film I've never seen. Like that's who you are.
That would explain why I can never finish things.
Yeah, it's perfect.
All his movies just kind of go.
Yeah.
But enough about talking about how great and campy I am. Let's talk about Bob. That's about
Bob? Yeah. So again, Bob Newhart, 1972 to 72 was the Bob Newhart show. He takes 4 years off. He's he goes back and does again he has this lifelong friendship with the most boisterous man of all time, Don Rickles. Like if you've ever seen the Don Rickles documentary that HBO did, they're best friends, but no one can explain it because Bob is so subtle and Don is like being punched with a bag of hammers.
An Oscar. That's what it is.
They probably did it at some point at some LA theater. My favorite Don Rickles thing of all time is I was an SNL nut as a kid, and this had to be 82, 83, so I'm like 5. But I would watch SNL and like I wouldn't get half the jokes. But Don Rickles hosted during the really the bad Don Ohlmeyer season. Like this is a bad season, and Don Rickles is hosting. And he does his act for the monologue. He just goes out there and does his act, and he finds this like 15-year-old Puerto Rican kid, and he puts his arm around him and goes, "How old are you, son?" And he says, 15. And he smacks the kid in the face. Like not hard, but just like this. He goes, "Don't lie to me." Just smacks him in the face. And again, Don Rickles did all these things like at the where am I coming? I don't know, but at the 1984 inauguration of President Reagan, one of the special guests was an evangelist like Billy Graham, I think, like the original evangelist, like
Yeah, I think he's one of the few that didn't have some crazy financial or sex scandal. So
And
probably
he
Billy,
goes,
right?
Billy Graham is here. He just points to Billy Graham and goes, "This arm has been hurting," and it just kills. It just destroys. So these two men were friends again, did shows together, and it just makes no sense that someone so boisterous, his best friend is quiet. I've never seen that in real life, where like my best friend is not quiet. Like we're both just loud assholes, you know. um, so we get the Newhart show, which is the perfect element for him because he is playing a writer who decides to open a New Hampshire bed and breakfast. And
no,
much
Vermont,
like
Vermont.
Yeah, Vermont. Sorry, you're right. So much like Mayberry, or you know, because I am this person, I spent 2 or 3 days in college watching like old television. Like I saw the Jack Benny show. I watched every episode over like a 3-day period. I was just in there with the library tapes, just one after the other. Where Jack Benny was funny, but what was funny was the insane people that were around him. And I think Bob Newhart kind of learned, as great as the Bob Newhart show is, let's jump it up a notch and let's make them even crazier. You have, Daryl, my other brother Daryl, like, and you have these insane people that are from town. Tom Poston plays his handyman. This weird heiress moves in, played by Pamela Duffy, who
Julia Duffy.
Julia Duffy, by the Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go.
Julia Duffy is almost like the spirit animal of the show because Julia Duffy was the original choice for Diane on Cheers. And she replaced Delta Burke for one miserable season on Designing Women.
Yeah, and I got confused because I saw like Julia Duffy Designing Women.
Yes.
And I got it confused with Julia Sugarbaker.
Yes.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So this is the original maid, her cousin, rich cousin is replacing her. So I get all excited and I sit down and wait. I'm going to watch this episode. You know, it's not the last. It's season 2, I think, or 3. And this blonde comes on that's just complaining about her parents or something. And I'm like sitting here and I'm like, when is Julia coming on? And then a few minutes, I'm like, oh wait, I'm thinking of Dixie Carter.
Yes,
I was waiting for Dixie Carter the whole time. I'm like, wow, she looks so different between this and Designing. Like, is that a wig? How did she do that accent?
Yeah, she joined Designing Women the year that this show ended. And again, she was on the entire run. Her and her weird husband, played by the guy from Bosom Buddies, and then later played the gay father of girls, who's also an amazing juggler.
He was the dad in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
No, that's Rick Moranis.
I think, wasn't he? No, the other dad.
I don't think, maybe, I don't know.
I looked it up.
Okay. I don't remember him at all. I don't remember there being another dad.
The one he's like, let's go hustle, Russell. I think that was him.
So
like he plays totally not this character. He's like, he's like outdoors, I think, unless I got it wrong. But I looked up the actor, and then I looked up.
Yes.
I hope I'm right.
So Peter Scolari plays his character, and it's just they live in the hotel. She becomes the maid in the hotel, and it's just so weird. And it's just, you watch Mayberry, you watch the show, and actually now you have Schitt's Creek, which is the same show. Like Schitt's Creek is literally just Newhart. It's just super weird people who congregate around a hotel run by the only difference is no one is sane on that show. There is no Newhart. There's no Bob. There's no Bob on that show. They're all nuts.
Yeah, they're all. Oh, I'm sorry. There was apparently a TV show called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
I did not remember that.
The thing I watched Newhart every week. I was a nut for the show. It was just my comfort level of comedy. It was just Bob Newhart being a genius, and then like the Daryl brothers and Larry and Daryl and all this stuff was great. I can't remember. It's not like Designing Women, because again, when we decided to do Designing Women, or we decided to Cheers, there were episodes I remember. There are moments I can't. Besides the finale, I can't tell you a single moment from that show, but I can tell you about the characters and how deep they were and how amazing they were and how they played off of Bob so well. They just allowed Bob to just stand there and just be silent for 30 seconds after they stopped talking. From Tom Poston to Peter Scolari to, Larry and his two brothers, Daryl, who, by the way, the lead Daryl went on to be on one of my favorite shows, Deadwood, as the hotel owner Just a
I
great
haven't
character
seen
act. Just
Deadwood.
all these great character actors on this show. And it's so brilliant because again, it's all based on this idea of how can you build around this genius. And again, Norm Macdonald, when he had his TV show, wanted the same thing. He wanted to be surrounded by all these people that were just so different than him. And he's such a genius. And again, a lot of people that went on to do great shows did this kind of amazingness. And I'm really rewatching a couple episodes again. I don't remember. I'm rewatching like literally for the 5th time. I'm watching ER because I'm just in that kind of place where I don't want to watch anything new. Just rewatching. I'm like in the 4th season already, and there'll be a line of dialogue, and I'm like, okay, that's this episode, and I'll be right. Like I'll just know, oh, Mick Reed's in this episode. That means it's this episode, and then like that stuff happens. But with Bob there's no Newhart show. There's no plot I remember. There's no plot of like Bob Newhart show you remember. You remember certain funny moments, but you remember the characters. Like I remember, I could see Peter Scolari in his ridiculous sweaters and his khakis, and I just all these things I could picture them perfectly. And that's what's the beauty of those shows were. It's not like, again, if you ask me, can you name 5 plots to Family Ties? I could do it in a second. The Cosby Show, absolutely.
You could do some, yeah.
Who's the Boss? All those shows, I can tell you specific plots from specific shows. I cannot tell you a Newhart plot.
I can remember one plot from Who's the Boss, and it's when, oh my God, I forgot her name. Alyssa Milano's character.
Yeah.
She got a hickey and tried to hide it.
Yes, I remember that one. But also the one where like Mona was in a sexy ad and it made her grandson upset. I remember that episode.
I remember that, but I remember
Tony Danza like walking into the shower and catching his, Angela showering. I remember a lot. Like there's a lot of them like Growing Pains. I can tell you exactly what happened when Matthew Perry died in that show.
Yes,
but
I cried so much.
Besides the finale, which I will talk about in a second, besides the finale in New York, I cannot tell you a single plot from it, and I watched it religiously. But I remember every character like it was yesterday. And I think that was what Newhart was going for. Newhart was not going, it was not a plot-rich show. It was not a first act, second act, third act. It was just what weirdo is going to bother Bob this week.
That was I was going to say, that was basically it. And but yeah, but it's always someone okay, so Amazon doesn't have the series finale.
No.
I had to watch it on YouTube, but I didn't realize that. So I watched what I thought was the series finale. And then I was like, this is what people made a big deal about this, but they have this older couple that goes to check in. They're complaining about this couple on the cruise. And our oldest is down visiting right now, Patrick. And I was like, do you recognize the lady? He's like, that's Happy Gilmore's grandma. I'm like, that's right. Yeah. So it's like, it's pretty cool. And then in the series finale, the actor that is the businessman, is from 16 Candles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this last episode the show was always crazy, but this last episode was so crazy. You're like, there's something wrong. Because it's Chinese, it's Japanese. It's Japanese. The Japanese businessmen decide to buy the town, and all the freaks of the town are freaked out. They're like, Bob, what do we do? And Bob's like, I'm not the mayor. I'm not like, why do you come to me?
They're like, we're not gonna. It was during a town meeting.
Yeah.
And they have this thing for this anniversary. Oh, the town's been around this many years, and here's our things. And
yeah.
And there's also a presentation of Fiddler on the Roof that we're giving. And then the businessman's like, I love your town. I have loved its small culture. It's just so homey. I would like to buy it and tear it down and make a luxury golf course. And they're like, no, you will never do that. This, it might not be much. He goes, I will pay $1 million for each home. They're like, all right.
Yeah. So they all come in like Bob Newhart's wife, who again is pretty forgettable through the whole show. She's not Suzanne Plachette. She starts dressing like a geisha for the rest of the episode because she's so excited for $1 million.
5 years later, everyone sells out.
Everyone sells it for
Bob and his wife. Yeah. And then it just fast forwards to 5 years later.
And they're all rich, like way too rich for. Makes no sense. Like they all are way richer.
Like even in late 80s money.
Yeah.
It's way too much for $1 million. Like, it's not vulgar rich, but they'd be like, he just has a lousy million. What, you know?
So
And
so then the end, he opens the door to his, again, this bed and breakfast he's on the entire show. He opens the door and a golf ball hits him on the top of the head. And the next thing you know, he's in a bed. And if you have watched Bob Newhart, you know exactly where this is. You know exactly what's happening. And he wakes up and he's next to his wife from the Newhart show. And the entire this is and this is the entire, what's the spoiler? The entire show was the entire Newhart show was a dream that Bob had after having bad Chinese food.
Japanese. That's Japanese, why he's like,
yes. Yeah, he has bad food and he wakes up and he's next to Suzanne Plachette and they're in they rebuilt this. It was a secret. Again, this was back when TV shows tried to have secrets. Like, and this is maybe 4 years after Dallas had this entire season was a dream. Like, this was the era of this.
Yeah.
And the last line is so perfect, which is why it's Newhart, which is why Bob Newhart is involved in the show. Is the last line is to his wife, Suzanne Plachette. Because again, Plachette is his wife in the 70s show. His wife in the 80s show is probably 15 years younger, I would say. 15, maybe 20 years younger than him. They never mention, there's no like storyline like your wife is clearly a mail order bride. There's none of that. So his last line is, you should wear more sweaters to Suzanne Plachette.
Sweaters and Newhart.
Yes, that's why we're doing this.
Sometimes they're low cut and sometimes they're tight, but they showcase. They're a lovely sweater.
The perfect. So
yeah. Meanwhile, she's like, "What do you mean you were married to a blonde?"
Yeah. It's a perfect moment. I think on a survey of the greatest TV endings is in the top 5. I would not disagree with that. I can't think of something that's a better secret.
They hit the dream thing perfectly.
Yes.
Especially the end part, because I think we've all had that dream where suddenly there's this chaos and because all these people show up and then they all, instead of just going in the room with the person they're married to or their family, they're like, we should figure out where we want to go. And there's all this, and blah, blah, blah.
It's amazing.
It's just like trying to get their attention. It's that classic dream we've all had where we're trying, guys, and everyone's ignoring you and you don't know. And that usually gets to that right before you. And I was like, wow, it actually does make sense that would be
it's great. Dream. So again, this show's first year. If they're not first year last, we're going to talk about to tally his first comedy CD, which has got a name that Warner Brothers picked for it, which is The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart, which is a perfect 1958 title. It's perfect. It was not the title he wanted. He wanted to call it The Greatest Comedy Mind Since Attila the Hun. That was his idea. For once, I think the studio got it right, because I think it sets you up perfectly for who Bob Newhart is. It sets you up perfectly for everything, and this is a 34-minute masterpiece. This is such a masterpiece that I told Virginia before the show this, something that is insane. This is crazy. It won Best Album at the Grammys. Not only that, Bob Newhart won Best New Artist. Yeah. So in the long line of geniuses that are Best New Artists, again, including the great Milli Vanilli, because I think they sang those songs. I still believe that. They did. Bob Newhart is listed. Like Eminem, Cyndi Lauper, Prince, Bowie, and Bob Newhart. Yes, it is an amazing album, but I don't know how this won Album of the Year. I understand this is before the British invasion, so it's probably like a Beach Boy album that was just sand references for 75 minutes. But this one, Best Album. It's great. Like, again, it's 7. What's great about Bob Newhart is the first 30 seconds is him explaining the premise for every bit. Like, the first bit is...
He sets it up.
The first bit literally is, what if Abraham Lincoln had advertising men working for him? Again, he came from advertising. This is something he probably did at meetings, at like conventions, and then someone said, hey, you should do this on stage, and it kills. It's very funny. They basically set up to be him being murdered at Ford's Theater. They don't get the 407 years ago reference. They go, just say 87 years. What are we doing here? Like, it's really funny, but it's a nice setup for what he does. I think it's almost more of a palate cleanser. Because like you probably just saw a comic who was like, "Hey, how are you?" And just just took your tie and cut it. It's kind of ridiculous. And then Bob Newhart comes out and he's just like, "Okay, so I mean, what would happen if what would happen if Abraham Lincoln had advertising men working for him in the 1860s. And then he does it. And again, it's like we were saying before, it's this half conversation where you don't know what Abraham Lincoln said, but you do know what Abraham Lincoln said because of how brilliant Bob Newhart is. The second bit is the owner of, not the owner, but the captain of a submarine that was out to sea for 2 years, which is hilarious. It's so funny. And again, it's him talking half a conversation. He's talking to the crew. Men. Like, by the way, we have blown up and shot down more Japanese aircraft carriers and submarines than any submarine in the history of the Navy. We did it in 1954, but still, we hold the record. Our attack on Miami was ill-conceived. I give you that. And then, like, he keeps talking about the number of times the crew tried to mutiny against him. And just you keep trying to. I never close my door anymore. Like, just
he's
it's
like,
so,
my door's
it's
always
so
open.
great.
I would like that back sometime too, I think.
Like, I really think I imagine Larry David listened to these albums and some of his crazier ideas came from these albums. But like, there's that one. There is, like, we talked about the driving instructor for the woman, which is hands down one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life.
The great thing with it is it's just the instructor is asking all the questions because he's the newest one. Yeah. So it's this quiet anxiety that just builds and builds up to the moment that he screams. Just loses it. He
screams, yeah. Which again, this album
just with the kid where I'm like, okay.
It's a six track of the album. He's so smart. He sets it up so perfectly. Where he's like, the Khrushchev check, this thing where Eisenhower's involved, and all these things are going on. Where he's a TV producer. The whole album is so smart. The second to last track is that, and then the final track is one that I think is probably to me the most Larry David-esque, which is like, how did baseball become a game? Like, how did that happen? Like, and the guy, he just says things like, okay, how many people do you need for this game? 18. Most games are just like 2 or 3 couples around a table. I don't know if you can get 18 people to do anything. I really don't. It's so perfect. So it's 3 strikes and 4 ball. Like, how'd you come up with that? Oh, then if it goes, then it's out. It's all these things. Like, it makes complete sense. Like, my favorite Larry David thing from the first special is he says it must have been really hard to get posses once you got answering machines, which is a non sequitur because that makes no sense. It's 200 years apart. But then he has this guy just leave a message and like, hey Phil, this is Sheriff Johnson and I'm here to we need to get the Calvin boys. They're up in the mountains. There's some bad motherfuckers, man. There's some bad dudes, but we gotta go up there. We gotta get them. It's gonna be you, me, and a couple guys. It's gonna be cold and it's gonna be awful. And then like 2 weeks later, that Phil guy sees. He goes, Sheriff, what happened? I came and you were already gone. I missed you somehow. What happened? Oh, no, don't. It's one of the fun. It's such a perfect. It really is. At his heart, Larry David is a Bob Newhart comic. He's more boisterous. He's like let's be fair. If Don Rickles and Bob Newhart had a kid, it'd be Larry David because he's both of them. Yeah. He's like one of his great bits in that first album is the one thing I give Hitler credit, again, Larry David's Jewish. The one thing I give Hitler credit for is he didn't take shit from magicians. And then he goes into this bit about how after a magic show, Hitler goes to the backstage and he says, it was very nice what you did up there. It was very funny. I found it. Where's the rabbit? And then the magician's like, I'm sorry, Der Fuhrer, it's one of my series. Like, you will tell me where the rabbit is. And it's just this whole bit where Larry David just goes nuts as Hitler. And just the non sequitur, which is a Bob Newhart non sequitur, it really is. The thing you have to give Hitler credit for is he didn't take shit from magicians. It's a perfect Bob Newhart piece. Like, listen to all his albums again. The most famous piece. If you're gonna listen to one Bob Newhart bit, I would say the baseball one's amazing and the driver's great. It is the King Kong bit. I think it's the King Kong bit is his kind of like that's his thesis statement because again it's a phone call. He did it on Ed. He did it on that show and he does it with a phone where he's talking to someone about King Kong climbing someone's building. Like he's like the super at a building that's being climbed by King Kong. And he's like, okay, that's not something I really cover. Like that's not, Like if your sink's broken, I don't take care of gigantic monkeys. And it's just, he's the base, I did improv for a long time, and I really realize now a lot of my basis for what I enjoy doing is the reality of Bob Newhart, because Bob Newhart is a realist. He takes ridiculous situations like someone trying to okay the game of baseball or an advertising man working with Abraham Lincoln, but he does it completely seriously. Like the thing I work with my students on is don't try to say something funny, say something real. And if you watch enough Bob Newhart, you realize all he did was real. He did ridiculous things. It's ridiculous ideas. But it's at the heart of it is a sensible human being in a crazy situation. Like one of my favorite, it's changed the way I look at SNL. It's changed the way I look at improv. Is a comedic actor, like someone from the Groundlings or from Second City, wants to put a crazy person in a real situation. And the perfect example of that is Kristen Wiig's Target Lady. Like if you think about that, if you think of like Dana Carvey's Church Lady, these crazy characters in very normal situations. That is a comedy actor's idea of funny because they're the center. A comedy writer's idea, Robert Downing, a comedy writer's idea is a completely normal human being at the center of a crazy premise.
Okay, that might explain why I like her in Bridesmaids more than I like the Target Lady.
Yeah, like that's a perfect example.
Because she's just basically. Yeah.
She's the most normal. She really is the most normal. You have the craziness around her; they're all crazy, and then she's kind of the center character. That's the Bob Newhart thing. And Bob Newhart, at his heart, is a comedy writer, so he really did. He put normal people into crazy situations. My favorite Will Ferrell stuff is not him being crazy; it's him being like at the heart of it, going, "That doesn't make sense. Like, why would you do that?" Like,
although I saw a recent one where he's like in a cat toy company.
Yes, that's his first.
And I like that because he's acting very seriously about it.
Yeah.
Like, well, we got to test how the cats do it. He's not making goofy faces. He's like, so it's almost like a mix.
It's a great point. Like, I think his best characters are serious people in insane situations. Like but that's like, to me, that's two different worlds of comedy. Like it's the difference between a Jim Carrey and a Will Ferrell to me. Like Jim Carrey is the craziness in the heart of something sensible. Like if you look at him in like The Cable Man, everyone else in that movie is completely normal, and they just have to play off his zaniness. Like there's nothing crazy. Like Along Came Paul is another great example. Like where female Summer Hoffman is like you surround yourself with crazy characters, and you're the person in the middle saying, "How do I get through this? Like how do I survive this to get to my job or to get to my wife who's like those comedies work because you have to have that different energy. And again, I will never forget that quote as long as I live, that comedy writers put in completely sane people in crazy situations. Because someone has to recognize the crazy. If everyone's crazy, then it's fine. Like, okay, we all have tinfoil on our heads. We all think it's good. Like, that's the beauty of it. So again, if you, like I said, if there's one Bob Newhart bit you'll check out, I would say it has to be the King Kong bit. It is his thesis statement. It is his masterpiece. It's what he does best. He brought calmness to the world of comedy. And in some ways, Lenny Bruce, who was along the same lines, is a Bob Newhart comic. Because as much as he said the 7 filthy words and he said crazy things, he was never boisterous. Like you watch him on Maisel, you watch his stuff. He's the voice of calm in a doldrum of craziness. He sees the craziness. It's not like, it's not like Don Rickles, like literally, going, look at those 2 black guys. They're going to rob me later. Like that's he can get away with it because he's Don Rickles. But Bob Newhart brought such a center of humanity to comedy in a way. So any final thoughts on the great Bob Newhart, Virginia?
I'm trying to think for the last album.
Yes.
Is there anything you'd recommend on that? I like the airplane one just because it starts off where he starts talking about John Wayne, watching a John Wayne movie, and then he goes, okay, now I have a problem because I actually wanted to talk about airplanes, and there's really no way to segue into that. Many times in war, they fly airplanes. Speaking of airplanes,
it's a very Andy Kindler thing. Like I love Andy Kindler because again, I don't want to break this down into like these like minutiae of comedy. Because again, once like talking about comedy is like dancing about architecture. It doesn't make sense. Like when you break down comedy at a certain level, it stops being funny. But these are men who I'm someone who breaks down comedy. I look at something and I go, how did you do that? Like how did that like how did you figure out that premise and how did you find one of the things in that really great special that now is of course maligned because Louis C.K. is on it is Louis C.K. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, and Richard Gervais talking about comedy, and Jerry Seinfeld gives Chris Rock a great compliment that he says the reason why he repeats things so much is his premises are not stock premises. They're not things that people recognize. And you have to force people to recognize what he's doing. It's not airplane food sucks. It's not, oh, my wife's a real nag. It's Chris Rock premises are so difficult that he has to repeat it till you get it. And it's amazing. And with Bob Newhart, the premises are so perfectly chunked into 30 seconds. And like you're able to, there's none of the things on that first album that I couldn't explain in 30 seconds why he's doing it. Because he explains it in 30 seconds. It's not the easy premise, but it's an easy to understand premise.
Oh, and I remember the other one. When listening to the last one, the last joke on it is actually a very familiar joke. I've read it in Reader's Digest as a kid. I've heard other people tell it. I had no idea he originated it. And it's the way I always describe it to people, they already know it. And it actually tells the plot, but I'll just say they're on the roof.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that they're on the roof joke? I guess Bob did it first. He does start saying maybe you've heard it, but I feel like maybe they didn't hear it, and
right.
and I was just completely stunned because I was like, I know this joke. I just assumed it's just always been there.
There's few things I love more than super long jokes with very poor punchlines, because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey and how funny the journey is and how much you get into it. Like the perfect example of this to me, besides like the Aristocrats and like Bavarian Cream Pie, my favorite is the Moth that Norm Macdonald does on one of his last appearances on Conan. If you just put in Norm Macdonald and the Moth, you'll see
I've seen it.
The perfect example of my favorite kind of joke. And I do these jokes to my students when we're bored, and they get so mad at me. Because it's like I go 7, 8, 9 minutes into this extremely long joke, and then the punchline is so dumb. The punchline is so dumb. They want to hit me. They want to hit me and get suspended forever. They're so mad at me, but it makes me laugh so hard because it's my favorite kind of joke. And Bob Newhart in a certain way does that. He does these long. Like again, I was never brave enough to do a 7-minute premise.
No, well, I never even tried stand-up. So
if you go 7 minutes in and like, what if you're minute 3 in and no one's laughing and no one cares about it? You got 4 more minutes.
That's what I feel.
It's
that's terrifying. What I worry.
Like Bob does it.
The scene in Mazel where it's all quiet. I'm like, that would be it. That would be
like
it.
Look at any 80s, 90s Eddie Murphy, any of these comics that did comedy albums, any of them, even the great ones. There's 15 to 30 track listings. Bob Newhart had 7 on this album. He had 7. He went through 7 premises and did over 30 minutes. Like it's unheard of. Like it's just such long pieces. And it's not attention span. You can tell me all you want, like it wouldn't work. Play it for a kid. They're gonna laugh at the same spots because he sets it up so well.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, if you're gonna listen to one, it's King Kong. But if you have time, listen to the entire first album, the Button Down Mind of Bob Newhart. It's a perfect title, by the way. It's perfect. So next month we are doing probably my single favorite actor. I am going to cry next month. So if you're like, I haven't seen Mr. Smith cry or Jeffrey Smith cry in like 3-4 months of the show, get ready.
During Magnum.
Yes, that's true. I did. You're right.
This is the first episode in a while that we haven't cried.
Yay!
Thank you, Bob Newhart.
Thank you, Bob. Hey, Bob. I'm gonna go drink now that I said hey, Bob. Hey, Bob. But no, we're doing Philip Seymour Hoffman, and we're going to consider his first film to be oh God, it's the one with Al Pacino. What's the Oh, we're talking about all of them. We're just watch every Philip Seymour
I
Hoffman.
have it up here. No,
Son
wait,
of a
that's
woman.
his obituary.
Son of a.
Oh my God. God, I haven't
So
watched Son of
yes,
a Woman probably since it first came out on
Son of a Woman. We're talking about that. We're talking about, of course, about
video.
Wilson's War. We're going to talk about
Big
The
Lebowski.
Dead, The Big Lebowski. We're going to talk about Boogie Nights, which one of our husbands does not care for that performance. Okay, again, I don't have a husband, so we're going to talk about it, and I'm hoping Al guest stars in the next episode and just tells me why when I say to him, "I want to kiss you in the mouth," why he does not reciprocate. But so next month is Philip Seymour Hoffman month. We're very excited. Virginia, you've been amazing this episode as you are every time. I can't ask for a better co-host.
I have enjoyed it.
Awesome. Everyone have a great rest of the month.
Yay.